In Unit 2, we learnt about EP 100, more commonly referred to as the Code of Ethics. We learnt about the fundamental principles of ethics for professional accountants. We also learnt to identify threats to compliance and the safeguards we can implement to eliminate these threats. We move on now to Unit 3. This unit introduces another set of guidelines for professional accountants. But before we look at these requirements, did you know that our laws require all of us to report suspicious financial transactions? According to the Singapore Police Force, money laundering is an international concern. Criminals launder proceeds of crime to legitimize their ill-gotten gains. If they are not stopped, they can enjoy the fruits of their crime and be incentivized to commit more financial crime. Countries and regions in many parts of the world have seen terrorist attacks in recent years. Governments worldwide have stepped up their efforts to counter acts of terrorism and the financing of terrorism. Singapore, being a financial center, faces a high risk. Money launderers or other criminals may abuse our financial system to launder their criminal proceeds and further their illicit activities. In the course of your trade, profession, business, or employment, if you know or have reasonable grounds to suspect that any property may be connected to criminal activity, you are required to file a Suspicious Transaction Report, or STR. Failure to report may constitute a criminal offence. This requirement is highly relevant for accountants. In the course of our work, we have intimate first-hand knowledge of customers and business transactions. Hence, we are in a strategic position to look out for suspicious transactions and identify money laundering or terrorist financing activities. EP 200 sets out the requirements for accountants as part of this global effort against criminal activity. At the end of this unit, you will be able to explain the rationale for the legislative framework on anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism in Singapore. Define money laundering, explain why it takes place and how it happens. Define terrorist financing and explain why it takes place. Recognize indicators of suspicious transactions. And describe responsibilities of the professional accountant with respect to suspicious transactions. Here's the lesson plan for this unit. You will need 2.5 hours to complete the learning activities in this unit. This week, the only graded activity is a quiz. The discussion board activity requires you to connect with your colleagues to find out their experience with suspicious transactions. I hope you will participate even though this activity is not graded. Now that we're done with the briefing for Unit 3, you can move on to your first activity. In 3.2, put yourself in the shoes of the young accountant in the comic. What would you do if your customer from India walks into your office with a suitcase of $1 million, offering to pay up his AR dues? Select from the options given.